My mother's hand trembled as she reached across the hospital bed rail toward me. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. My father stood behind her, his face pale and tired. "Please, Adalgo," Mom whispered. "You're the only match. You're our last hope." I looked at both of them. The machines around us beeped softly. The smell of hospital cleaning solution filled my nose. My younger sister Kamsioko sat in the corner, watching with her perfect makeup and designer clothes. I took a deep breath and said the words I'd been practicing in my head for the past 3 days. No. The room went silent. Even the machine seemed to stop beeping for a second. "What?" Dad's voice cracked. "What did you just say?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. "I won't give you my kidney." Mom's face turned white, her mouth opened, but no words came out. Kamsiachukwu jumped up from her chair. "Are you crazy?" Kamsi screamed. "Mom could die! How can you be so selfish?" I looked at Kamsi. Perfect Kamsi. Beautiful Kamsi. The daughter they actually wanted. "Selfish," I said quietly. "That's interesting coming from you." Dad stepped forward. His hands were shaking. "Adago, I know we've had our differences, but this is your mother's life we're talking about." "I know," I said. "And my answer is still no. But let me take you back to where this all started. Let me tell you why I was standing in that hospital room, saying no to saving my own mother's life. My name is Adago Okafor, and I'm 28 years old. For my entire life, I've been known as the difficult child in my family. When I was 5 years old, I learned that being difficult meant asking too many questions. It meant wanting to play with toy cars instead of dolls. It meant crying when I was hurt instead of being brave and quiet like my parents wanted. "Why can't you be more like other girls?" Mom would ask, shaking her head. When I was 7, my sister Kamsiochukwu was born. From the moment she came home from the hospital, everything changed. Kamsi was perfect. She had big brown eyes and soft curly hair that everyone loved. She smiled all the time. She never cried too loud. She never asked annoying questions. "Look at your sister," Dad would say to me. "She's so well behaved. Why can't you be more like her?" I remember the first time I really understood that my parents loved Kamsi more than me. I was 9 years old. It was my birthday. Mom had promised to take me to the zoo. I'd been excited about it for weeks. I'd marked each day on my calendar with a red marker. I'd read every book about animals in the library. The morning of my birthday, I woke up early. I put on my favorite blue dress. I ran downstairs to find Mom. She was in the kitchen feeding Kamsi, who was 2 years old. "Mom, are we going to the zoo?" I asked. Mom looked tired. "Oh, Adago, I'm sorry. Kamsi has a little cold. We can't go today." My heart sank. "But it's my birthday." "I know. No mamu. We'll go another day. Kamsi needs to rest." "But you promised," I said. I could feel tears building up in my eyes. "Don't be difficult, Adalgo," Mom said, her voice sharp. "Your sister is sick. Stop being selfish." We never went to the zoo. Mom never rescheduled. When I brought it up a week later, she said I was still complaining about that and that I needed to grow up and stop being so needy. That's when I learned my first important lesson. My needs didn't matter as much as Kamsi's. As I got older, the pattern became clearer. When I was 11, I wanted to join the school science club. I loved science. I wanted to learn about stars and planets and how things worked. "Science club," Dad laughed. "That's for boys, Adago. Why don't you join dance class with Kamsi?" "But I don't like dancing," I said. "You never like anything normal," Mom sighed. "You're always making things difficult." I didn't join science club, but they paid for Kamsi's dance classes and her piano lessons and her art classes and her gymnastics. When I asked if I could take guitar lessons, Dad said we couldn't afford it. 2 weeks later, Kamsi got a brand new bike for getting good grades on her report card. When I got good grades, Dad said, "Well, that's what you're supposed to do." When I was 13, something happened that I'll never forget. I was walking home from school. It was raining hard. I didn't have an umbrella because I'd left it at home that morning. Mom had seen me leave without it, but didn't call me back. I got home soaking wet. I was shivering and cold. I walked into the kitchen. Mom was there with Kamsi helping her with her homework. They were laughing about something. "Mom, I'm really cold," I said. "Can you help me find some dry clothes?" Mom looked at me. "You're dripping water on my clean floor. Go change yourself. You're 13, not a baby." Then she turned back to Kamsi. "Now, sweetie, let's finish this math problem together." I stood there for a moment, water dripping from my hair onto the floor. Neither of them looked at me again. I went upstairs alone. I changed out of my wet clothes alone. Later that night, I got sick with a fever. When Mom realized I was sick, she was angry. "Why didn't you tell me you were feeling bad?" she asked. "I did," I said quietly. "This afternoon when I came home wet." "Don't blame me for your choices, Adalgo," she said. "You chose to leave without an umbrella. This is your fault." But 2 months later, when Kamsi got caught in the rain at a friend's house, Dad drove across town in the middle of his workday to pick her up. Mom made her special pepper soup and sat with her all evening, making sure she felt okay. Kamsi didn't even get sick. "I want to be an engineer," I said. "You're being difficult again," Dad said. "Your mother is just trying to help you be realistic." I got accepted to a good engineering program. It wasn't the most famous university, but it was a solid school with a good program. When I told my parents, they said, "Oh, that's fine. Just fine." But when Kamsi got accepted to any college 2 years later, a college that accepted almost everyone who applied, they acted like she'd won the Nobel Prize. They bought her a car as a congratulations gift. They took her out to an expensive dinner. They called all our relatives to tell them the news. When I'd gotten into my engineering program, they'd taken me to a local fast food place and told me to order whatever I wanted. I moved away for college. It was the first time I felt like I could breathe. Away from home, I discovered something amazing. I wasn't difficult at all. My roommates liked me. My professors respected me. I made friends who actually wanted to spend time with me. "You're so easy to get along with," my roommate Chinenya told me once. I almost cried when she said that. Nobody had ever called me easy to get along with before. I called home once a week because I thought I should. The conversations were always short. "How are you?" Mom would ask. "Good. I got an A on my thermodynamics exam." "That's nice." Kamsi made the dean's list. "I'm on the dean's list too, Mom." "Oh, well, that's good. Listen, I have to go. I'm taking Kamsi shopping." Every time I came home for holidays, I felt like a guest in my own house. Kamsi's pictures covered the walls. Her trophies and ribbons filled the shelves. My room had been turned into a storage space. "We needed the room," Mom explained when I asked about my old desk and bookshelf. "You don't live here anymore." Kamsi still lived at home. Her room was exactly as she left it, plus more decorations. After college, I got a good job as a mechanical engineer in Port Harcourt. I was proud of myself. I'd worked hard. I'd graduated with honors. I'd gotten hired by a respected oil and gas company. I called to tell my parents. "That's great, Adogo," Dad said. His voice was flat. "Listen, can you send some money? Kamsi needs a new laptop for school." "Doesn't she already have a laptop?" I asked. "That one is 2 years old. She needs a newer one for her classes." "I just graduated, Dad. I'm still paying off student loans." "See, this is what I mean," Dad said. "You're always difficult when we ask you for help. Kamsi is family. Family helps each other. I sent the money. I always sent the money when they asked. Over the next 5 years, I sent money for Kamsi's laptop, Kamsi's study abroad trip, Kamsi's car repairs, Mom's vacation, Dad's new car, and a dozen other things. They never said thank you. They acted like I owed them. When I bought my own apartment in Port Harcourt, I invited them to see it. Mom said she was too busy. Dad said it was too far to drive from Lagos. Kamsi didn't even respond to my text. But when Kamsi moved into a new apartment in Lekki, one that my money had helped pay for, the whole family drove there to help her decorate. They posted pictures on social media. Family day helping our baby girl move. So proud. I wasn't in any of the pictures. I wasn't invited. 3 weeks ago, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was Dad. He was crying. I'd never heard my father cry before. Dargo, he said, his voice shaking. It's your mother. She's in hospital. Her kidneys are failing. She needs a transplant. My heart stopped. What happened? She's been sick for a while. We didn't want to worry you. They didn't want to worry you. They didn't want to worry me. They called me for money a dozen times but didn't tell me Mom was sick. Is she okay? I asked. The doctors say she needs a kidney transplant soon. We're all getting tested to see if we're matches. Kidney. I'll come to the hospital, I said. Okay, Dad said. Then he paused. Adago, we might need your help with medical bills. Of course, that's what I was good for. Money. I got tested. 2 weeks later, the results came back. I was a perfect match. Dad was not a match. Kamsi was not a match. Our extended family members were not matches or had health issues that made them unable to donate. I was the only one who could save Mom's life. The doctor called me into his office to explain everything. The surgery is major, he said. You'll need 4 to 6 weeks to recover. There are risks with any surgery. You'll experience pain at the incision sites, fatigue, and some discomfort. After donating, you'll permanently lose about 1/3 of your kidney function. But your mother needs this transplant within the next few months, or her condition will get much worse. Kidney plus 2. I sat in that doctor's office for a long time after he left. I thought about my entire life, every birthday forgotten, every achievement ignored. Every time I've been called difficult, selfish, or needy for just wanting to be loved. I thought about Kamsi's new car, bought with money that could have paid for my college textbooks. I thought about Mom turning away when I came home wet and cold. I thought about Dad telling me I wasn't trying hard enough when I won second place. I thought about every single time they'd made me feel like I wasn't good enough to be their daughter. And then I made my decision. Which brings me back to that hospital room, to Mom's trembling hand reaching for me, to Dad's pale face, to Kamsi's angry tears, to me saying no. You can't mean that, Mom whispered. Please, Adago, I'm your mother. You're right, I said. You are my mother. And for 28 years you've made me feel like I was a burden, like I was the problem, like loving me was too difficult. That's not fair, Dad said, isn't it? I looked at him. When was the last time you told me you were proud of me? When was the last time you came to visit me? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing and not because you needed money? We're your parents, Mom said. We don't have to say those things. You should know we love you. How would I know that? My voice was getting louder. By the way you forgot my birthdays. By the way you turned my room into storage. By the way you've spent the last 10 years treating me like an ATM machine. We gave you everything. Dad's face was turning red. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. You did the bare minimum that the law requires, I said. That's not the same as loving someone. Kamsi stepped forward. You're really going to let Mom die because your feelings are hurt? You're proving them right, Adago. You are selfish. You are difficult. I looked at my sister. My perfect sister. The one they'd always chosen over me. Research shows that parental favoritism can lead to family estrangement and serious emotional problems for the unfavored child. That was my entire childhood. Instagram, tell me, Kamsi, I said quietly. If you were a match, would you give Mom your kidney? Of course I would, Kamsi shouted, because I'm not a terrible person. Then I have a question, I said. If you love Mom so much, and if giving up a kidney is such an easy choice, why have you never given up anything for me? Kamsi blinked. What? I'm your sister, I said. Did you ever stand up for me when Mom and Dad treated me badly? Did you ever share your presence with me when I got nothing? Did you ever tell them it wasn't fair? Kamsi's face went red. That's different. How? Because you were always causing problems. You made everything difficult. I asked questions, I said. I had feelings. I wanted to be loved, and that made me difficult. The room was quiet again. A nurse knocked on the door but left when she saw we were talking. Mom was crying now, real tears running down her face. Please, Adago, she sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if we made you feel unloved. But please, you have to help me. I'm dying. I felt something crack inside my chest. Part of me, the little girl who just wanted her mommy to love her, wanted to say yes, wanted to be the hero, wanted to finally make them proud. But another part of me, the adult who'd spent years in therapy, learning to value herself, knew the truth. If I gave Mom my kidney, nothing would change. They'd thank me for a week, maybe a month. Then they'd go back to treating me the same way. I'd go back to being the difficult child who was never quite good enough. I'd give up a piece of my body, risk my health, take 6 to 8 weeks off work, and in return, I'd get the same crumbs of affection they'd always given me. Kidney registry. I need time to think, I said. There is no time, Dad shouted. The doctor said. I know what the doctor said, I interrupted. And I said I need time to think. I'll give you my answer in 3 days. I walked toward the door. Adugo, please, Mom's voice broke. Don't leave like this. I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. You've spent my whole life leaving me, I said quietly. Now you know how it feels. I walked out of the hospital room. Behind me, I could hear Kamsi screaming, Mom crying, and Dad shouting my name. But I kept walking. I got in my car. I drove back to my apartment in Port Harcourt. I walked inside, closed the door, and finally let myself cry. I cried for the little girl who just wanted her parents to come to her school plays. I cried for the teenager who ate lunch alone while her parents took Kamsi out to celebrate. I cried for the adult who tried so hard to earn love that should have been free. And then, as the sun set over the city and my apartment got dark, I pulled out my phone. I had 17 missed calls from Dad. 9 from Mom's phone, probably Kamsi calling from it. 12 text messages, each more desperate than the last. But there was one message that caught my eye. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. What I read made my blood run cold. The message on my phone was short. Hello, Adalgo. My name is Dr. Boma. I need to talk to you about your mother's case. It's urgent. Please don't tell your family I contacted you. I read it 3 times. My chest felt tight. Why would a doctor text me and tell me not to tell my family? I stared at the screen. For a moment, I thought it was a scam, but the number had a hospital name under it. I checked it again. It was the same hospital my mother was in. My hands were shaking as I typed back. Okay, I'm listening. A few seconds later, my phone started ringing. It was the same number. I swallowed and picked up. Hello? Good evening, Miss Okafor, a man's voice said. His voice was calm and serious. This is Dr. Boma from Meridian Specialist Hospital. Am I speaking with Adago, daughter of Mrs. Izine Okafor? Yes, I said slowly. That's me. Thank you for responding, he said. First, I want you to know your mother is stable for now. She's in stage 5 kidney failure, which we call end-stage renal disease. That means her kidneys are functioning below 15%, and she will need dialysis and then a transplant to survive long-term. I understand, I said softly. I knew a bit about kidney failure from what the other doctor had told me, but hearing it again made it feel heavier. He continued. We ran all the compatibility tests. You are, as they told you, a very good match for your mother. I know, I whispered. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did they also explain the risks to you clearly? For you as the donor?" "Yes," I said. "They said surgery is major. I'll need weeks to recover. And there are risks. Pain, fatigue, losing some kidney function forever." "That's true," he said. "Living kidney donors can usually live a normal life, but there are higher risks of high blood pressure, complications in pregnancy if you plan to have children, and higher risk if anything ever happens to your remaining kidney in the future. We never force anyone. It must be your choice." I nodded, even though he could not see me. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. "Why did you say I shouldn't tell my family?" He sighed, and I heard papers moving in the background. "Because," he said slowly, "I think there are things you don't know, and you deserve to know them before you decide." My heart dropped. "What things?" "First," he said, "your father spoke with the transplant team earlier today. He told them that you had already agreed to donate." I froze. "What?" "Yes, he signed some preliminary consent forms on your behalf," he said. "Of course, they are not legal without your own signature, but he told the team that you are only being dramatic and that you will agree later." I felt my face grow hot. So they were already telling people I had agreed, even after I said no. I laughed, but it sounded broken. "That sounds like him," I said bitterly. "There is more," the doctor said softly. I sank slowly onto my couch. "Go ahead. Your father also asked if there was a way to speed things up with your approval," he said. "He asked if your signature could be waived if you were not fully willing but still present." The team refused. They told him clearly that organ donation must be completely voluntary. My stomach twisted. "Are you saying," I asked, my voice shaking, "that my father tried to see if he could force me to donate without my real consent?" "That is what it sounded like," the doctor said slowly. "To be clear, we would never do that." But his question worried me. I covered my mouth with my hand. My own father was trying to find a way to push me into surgery. Of course he was. "Of course. That's why I'm calling you," the doctor said, "to make sure you understand that no one can force you, and to make sure you know the full situation." "The full situation," I repeated. "What else is there?" He cleared his throat again. "There is something your family did not tell you," he said. "I cannot force them to share it, but as your mother's doctor and as a doctor responsible for your safety, I believe you should know." Something cold moved down my spine. "What?" I whispered. "There is a reason your mother's kidneys failed," he said. "It's not just random. She has long-term uncontrolled hypertension, high blood pressure." "Okay," I said. "I know a lot of people have that." "Yes," he replied, "but she was diagnosed years ago and given medicine. She was advised many times to take it daily, to come for regular checkups, to reduce salt intake, and to stop taking certain painkillers her body could not handle." I closed my eyes. I could already see where this was going. "She did not follow the instructions, did she?" I asked. There was a small pause. "No," he said quietly, "she did not. For years, her blood pressure remained high. Over time, that damaged the small blood vessels in her kidneys. That is one of the most common causes of kidney failure." I swallowed hard. "So you're saying she could have reduced the risk of this happening?" "In many cases, yes," he said. "If high blood pressure is controlled, if medication is taken regularly, if diet and lifestyle are managed, kidney damage can often be slowed down. Sometimes it can be delayed for many years." He stopped to choose his words. "In your mother's case," he said finally, "her condition did not just fall from heaven. It was built over many years of ignoring medical advice." I opened my eyes and stared at the wall. I started to remember little things. Mom complaining about bitter drugs. Mom saying doctors just like to talk too much. Mom drinking very salty soup. Mom saying, "I feel fine, Jerry. All these checkups are a waste of money." I never knew it was this serious. My throat felt dry. "Why didn't they tell me?" I asked. "I'm not sure," he said. "Sometimes families hide details to make it easier to convince someone to donate. Sometimes they are ashamed. Sometimes they believe family must help no matter what. I laughed again, but there were tears in my eyes now. Family must help, I repeated slowly. Family must help. Except when the family member is me. There was a short silence. Miss Okafor, the doctor said gently, I cannot tell you what to decide. I just want you to make your decision with all the information. If you choose to donate, it should be from your heart. If you choose not to, that is also your right. Your life and health matter too. I took a deep breath. Thank you, doctor, I said. We will respect whatever you decide, he said. If your family pressures you or threatens you, please let the transplant team know. There are social workers who can help. You are not alone. After we ended the call, I put my phone down on the table and stared at the ceiling. I felt like the floor beneath my life had cracked open. So my mother had ignored her health for years. My father was trying to push my consent. And now, suddenly, everybody wanted me to be the hero. A different kind of flashback. As I sat there in the dark, another memory rose up in my mind. One I had tried to forget. I was 22 years old. It was during my final year at university. I had exams soon. I was tired and stressed. That day, my phone rang. It was Dad. Adigo, he said. We need money. My chest tightened. It was like a script we had repeated many times. For what this time? I asked. For your mother's church pledge, he said. She made a promise to support a building project. I remember staring at my exam notes spread across my bed. Daddy, I have exams, I said. I need to pay for some extra materials. I'm barely managing as it is. Don't talk like that, he snapped. Can money be more important than God's work? Your mother has faith. This is for the house of God. I didn't say it's not important, I said, already feeling guilty. But I really don't have much left. You see, he said, any small thing you start complaining. You're so difficult. Is it because we gave you a chance to go to school that you think you can talk to us like this? Your sister never argues when we ask her for help. Because you don't ask her for anything, I said under my breath. What did you say? Nothing. In the end, I sent the money. I stayed in my hostel eating Gary with groundnuts for 2 weeks so I could afford my textbooks. They never asked if I had enough left for myself. They never said thank you. Now, years later, it felt like nothing had changed. Only this time, they didn't want my money. They wanted my kidney. The call from Dad. My phone started ringing again. It was Dad. I watched it ring until it cut off. He called again and again. Finally, on the third try, I picked up. Adago, he shouted. Why are you not answering your phone? Are you okay at all? I took a slow breath. I'm fine, I said. Fine, he repeated. Your mother is in the hospital and you're saying you're fine? What kind of child are you? The hurt in his voice twisted my chest. But there was something else too. Anger, entitlement, as if my fear and confusion did not matter. How is she? I asked. She's there, hooked up to machines, he said. Is that what you want? For your mother to die while you sit down in Port Harcourt forming stubborn? I closed my eyes. I never said I want her to die. Then come tomorrow and sign the papers, he said. Silence. Daddy, I said quietly, I told you I need time to think. Think about what? He shouted. Is it not simple? You have 2 kidneys. She has none. You give her one. You keep one. Everybody lives. Why are you making it complicated? Because it's my body, I wanted to say. Because you never cared this much when it was my life on the line. Because you never asked what I needed. Instead, I asked, did you know Mum was not taking her medicine? There was a pause. What kind of stupid question is that? He snapped. It's a simple question, I said. Did you know? The doctor told me she was ignoring her blood pressure medicine for years. He hesitated. Your mother doesn't like drugs, he said finally. They make her feel weak. And she said she had faith that God would keep her well. Is that a crime now? It's not a crime, I said. But you both made choices. Choices that brought us here. Why are you talking like an enemy? He shouted. Are you now judging your own mother? Do you think you are better than us because you went to school? Because you have one small engineering job? I felt my jaw clench. I never said I'm better, I said. But I'm not a fool either. I'm old enough to know when I'm being used. Used? He repeated, sounding offended. Used how? Everything we have ever done for you and you stand there saying we are using you? You are an ungrateful child, Adago. Very ungrateful. We paid your school fees. We raised you. We, I cut in. And I paid for Kamsi's laptop, her trip, her car repairs, your car, Mum's vacation. I helped with rent. Did I ever say you're ungrateful? Or do only parents get to talk like that? He went quiet. I could hear him breathing hard. Don't talk to me like that, he said finally. His voice was low and dangerous. Remember, I am your father. I remember, I said, but I also remember you are the same father who never came for my competitions, who never told me, well done, unless it was about money. He hissed into the phone. So this is your problem, he said. Childhood grudges? Small things from when you were a stubborn girl. You want to use that to kill your mother now. I felt something snap inside me. Daddy, those small things destroyed me, I said, my voice shaking. You think I forgot? You think I don't remember how you treated me and Kamsi like we were not equal? How my pain was always drama, but hers was always important? If you like, talk from now till tomorrow, he said. It will not change the fact that your mother needs a kidney, and you are the only one who can help. If she dies, just know it is on your head. Her blood will be on your hands. The words hit me like a slap. Her blood will be on your hands. My breath caught in my throat. He continued, his voice cold now. If you refuse to help your own mother, don't bother coming for the burial, he said. Don't come near this family again. As far as I am concerned, you will no longer be my daughter. I felt something hot and sharp in my chest. For a second, it felt like my heart stopped. Are you serious? I whispered. I am very serious, he said. You think you are the only one who knows how to cut people off. I can also cut you off. Completely. If your mother dies because of your selfishness, I will never forgive you. Ever. He cut the call. Just like that. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. My father had just given me a choice. Give up a part of my body, or lose my family forever. The next morning I woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. I had barely slept. My phone lay on the bedside table full of messages. Some from Dad. Think well. Don't be stupid. Remember what I said. Some from Mum's phone, clearly typed by Kamsi. You are wicked. I can't believe you are doing this to Mom. After everything she has done for us. One message stood out. It was from an unknown number again. Good morning, this is the hospital social worker, Mrs. Igbokwe. If you need to talk, I am available. I stared at it for a long time. Then I got up, took a quick bath, put on a simple black dress and tied my hair back. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw tired eyes. But I also saw something else. A thin line of steel. I picked up my bag and my car keys. I was going back to Lagos. Not for them. For me. I needed answers. The drive from Port Harcourt to Lagos was long and heavy. The road was rough in some places. At one point, traffic slowed to a crawl. I had a lot of time to think. At first, my mind replayed my childhood memories like a movie. Every insult, every ignored victory, every time I had to beg for crumbs of affection. But then, my mind shifted to the present, to the hospital, to my mother's face when I said no, to my father's threat, to the doctor's warning. By the time I reached Lagos and turned into the hospital compound, my chest felt like someone had tied a rope around it. I parked and walked toward the main building. The smell of antiseptic hit me as soon as I stepped inside. Nurses and doctors moved up and down the corridor. People sat on benches, some crying, some sleeping, some staring into space. I asked the nurse at the front desk for the social worker, and she pointed me to a small office near the transplant unit. I knocked. "Come in," a woman's voice said. I opened the door. A woman in her late 40s sat behind a desk. She had kind eyes and short natural hair. Her name tag read Mrs. N. Igbokwe, medical social worker. "Good afternoon, Ma," I said. "Good afternoon," she replied with a small smile. "You must be Adago." "Yes," I said, sitting down. She studied my face for a moment. "You look tired," she said gently. "I am," I answered. She nodded slowly. "I won't waste your time," she said. "The doctor told me a little about your situation. I also saw your father this morning." My chest tightened. "Let me guess," I said. "He told you I'm wicked." She gave a small, sad smile. "He is very emotional right now," she said carefully. "He loves his wife and is scared. Scared people sometimes say harsh things." "That's a nice way to put it," I muttered. She folded her hands on the table. "Adako," she said softly, "this is a very difficult situation. On one side, your mother is sick and needs a transplant. On the other side, you have your own body, your own life, your own pain." I stared at her. "Everyone keeps saying it's difficult," I said. "But nobody seems to care that it's difficult for me too. They only care about her, like always." She nodded. "That is why I asked to speak with you alone," she said. "In this process, you are also a patient. A potential donor is a patient too, not just an extra part to be used." Her words surprised me. "Nobody has called me a patient before," I said quietly. She smiled faintly. "That is the problem in many families," she said. "They see the donor as just a solution, not as a human being with fears and scars. My job is to make sure you know your rights and your options." I shifted in my seat. "What options do I really have?" I asked. "If I say yes, I give up my kidney for people who treated me like I was never enough. If I say no, I lose them forever. Either way, I lose something." "Sometimes," she said softly, "the real question is not about what you lose, it's about what you can live with." Her words hung in the air. I swallowed. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course. If I say no, if I decide not to donate, will the hospital force me or try to change my mind?" She shook her head firmly. "No," she said. "We cannot force you. We must make sure you are not being threatened. If we believe you are being forced, we can stop the process, even on the day of surgery, even at the last minute." "And if I say yes?" I asked. "Then we will still ask you again," she said. "We will ask you in private. We will ask if anyone pressured you. If we suspect you are not sure, we can delay. The law and ethics say organ donation must be freely given, without fear." I leaned back and exhaled slowly. "Nobody in my family told me that," I said. "Of course not," she replied. "For them, they are desperate. They see only your mother's life. But for us, we must see everyone." She paused, then added quietly, "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "Do you love your mother?" she asked. The question hit me harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Did I love her? I remembered her ignoring my tears. I remembered her laughing at Kamsi's little jokes while I sat silent. I remembered her telling me, "Stop being dramatic," when I tried to talk about my feelings. But I also remembered her plaiting my hair when I was little. I remembered her singing softly in the kitchen sometimes. I remembered her holding my hand tightly the first time I had to get an injection. My throat felt tight. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Sometimes I think I hate her. Sometimes I think I still want her to hug me and say she is sorry." The social worker nodded slowly. "That's honest," she said. "Love in families is often mixed with hurt. It is not always clear." I rubbed my hands together. Do you think I'm a bad person for saying no? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. No, she said firmly. You are not a bad person for protecting yourself. You are also not a bad person if you choose to donate. Your decision either way does not erase what they did to you. It does not make their behavior right or wrong. It only shows who you are willing to be now. I swallowed. Who am I then? I whispered. That, she said, is what you have to decide. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said quietly, there is something else you should know. Your father mentioned something today that concerned me. My shoulders tensed. What did he say? He said, she replied carefully, that even if you are afraid now, he believes that, and I quote, once we bring her to the village and the elders talk to her, she will obey. She cannot shame us in front of the family. My skin went cold. The village, I repeated. Yes, she said. He talked about taking you to your hometown, gathering uncles and elders, and making them talk to you. He said when they all put pressure, you will not be able to refuse. I stared at her. Suddenly, everything felt more dangerous. This was not just about my parents. This could turn into a whole village council, a wall of old men and aunties calling me disrespectful, wicked, cursed. People shouting that I was bringing shame. People saying God will punish me if I don't obey. People trying to break me. I felt my hands start to shake. Can he do that? I asked. Can he just carry me there? If you go willingly, yes, she said. If you refuse, they might still try to pressure you emotionally. But listen to me, Adaugo. Her voice grew firm. No matter what they say, nobody in that village can sign consent for you. They can insult you, they can scream, they can threaten, but they cannot sign your name. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly. So everything comes back to me, I said. To this one decision. Yes, she said softly. To this one decision. A knock sounded on the door. The social worker looked up. Come in, she called. The door opened. My father stepped in. Behind him, my sister Kamsi. They both stopped when they saw me sitting there. My father's eyes were red. Kamsi's eyeliner was smudged, as if she had been crying. What are you doing here? Dad asked, his voice sharp. So you now have time to be talking to strangers, but you don't have time to say yes to your own mother. The social worker rose slowly. Good afternoon, Mr. Okafor, she said. We were just having a confidential session with your daughter. Confidential for what? He snapped. Is she a criminal? Is she the one on the sickbed? My wife is the one dying, and you people are here filling her head with rubbish. Daddy, stop, I said quietly. He turned to me. Don't tell me to stop, he said. Have you finally come to your senses? Are you ready to sign now? Kamsi stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Adago, she said, her voice shaking. Please, enough. This is not the time for your drama. Mom is asking for you. She's been calling your name since morning. My heart squeezed. She is asking for me, I repeated. Yes, Kamsi said. She says she wants to talk to you alone. She can't sleep. She can't eat. She can't eat. She keeps saying, call my daughter. Call Adogo. Are you happy now? You've broken her heart. I looked at the social worker. She gave me a tiny nod. You can go and see her, she said. Remember, you don't have to decide today. Just talk. I stood up slowly. My legs felt a little weak. Dad glared at me, his jaw tight. Kamsi folded her arms, waiting. We walked out of the office together, down the long white corridor, past nurses and patients and visitors. Each step felt heavier than the last. We reached the door to my mother's room. Dad opened it without knocking. See her, he said, his voice hard. The difficult child has finally come. I took a breath and stepped inside. My mother lay on the bed, her skin a little darker under the eyes, her cheeks thinner. Tubes and wires were connected to her arms. A machine beeped softly next to her. She turned her head slowly toward the door. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "A doggo?" she whispered. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "Mama," I said softly. Her lips trembled. She reached out a shaking hand toward me. "Please," she said, "there is something I need to tell you, something I've been hiding for 28 years. My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" I asked. Her eyes met mine. "It's about why I treated you the way I did," she whispered. "About why you were always the difficult child." She swallowed, her throat working. "Adahogo," she said, her voice breaking. "You need to know the truth about who you really are." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my life started to crack. My mother's words hung in the air like smoke. The truth about who you really are. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The machines kept beeping. The air conditioner hummed softly. A nurse walked past the door outside, pushing a trolley. But inside that room, time felt frozen. I swallowed. "What do you mean?" I asked. My voice sounded small, like a child's. Dad shifted beside the window. Kamsi stood with her arms folded, eyes moving from Mum's face to mine like she was watching a football match. Mum's hand shook as she reached for mine. "Come," she whispered. "Sit where I can see you well." I pulled the chair closer and sat down. Her fingers were cold when they closed around my hand. Up close, she looked older than I remembered. Fine lines cut across her forehead. Her lips were dry. Her eyes, though, were sharp. Too sharp for someone who claimed to be at the edge of death. "Tell them to go out," she said, nodding toward Dad and Kamsi. "I want to talk to you alone first." Dad straightened. "Ezine, what is all this?" "We are all Chinadu," she said, using his name in that soft but firm way I knew very well. "Please, let me speak with my daughter." The room went quiet. Dad's jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he would refuse. Then he hissed under his breath, picked up his phone from the side table, and walked toward the door. 5 minutes, he muttered. "Don't stress yourself too much." Kamsi hesitated, eyes still burning into me. Then she followed him out, closing the door behind them. The room suddenly felt bigger and smaller at the same time. Mum turned back to me. "Adalgo," she said softly. "My child." I felt something twist inside me at the word my. "My child," I repeated in my head. Did she mean it? Did she really see me as hers? I tried to push the thought away. "You said there is something I need to know," I reminded her. "Something about why you treated me the way you did." Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered, "and I should have told you a long time ago. Maybe then you wouldn't have grown up thinking you were hard to love." The words hit me like a slap. My throat tightened. "Then why didn't you?" I asked quietly. "You had 28 years. Her gaze dropped to our joined hands. "Because I was afraid," she said, "and because I was proud, and because, at first, I thought I was protecting you. Then later, I was trying to protect myself." I frowned. "Protect me from what?" She took a shaky breath. "From the truth," she said. "From how you came into this family." My heartbeat grew louder in my ears. "How I came into this family," I repeated. "What are you talking about? I was born here, in this house, in Lagos. You told me, I told you many stories." She cut in gently. "Half-truths, quiet lies. I told you what I could live with, not what actually happened." I stared at her. "Are you saying," my voice trembled, "are you saying you're not my real mother?" Her hand tightened around mine. Her eyes, wet with tears, met mine without flinching. "I carried you," she said slowly. "I gave birth to you, but I am not the one who created you. I am not the woman who first brought you into this world." I felt like the floor was tilting. My breath came faster. "What does that even mean?" I whispered. Speak plainly, Mama. Please. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When I married your father, she began, we tried for years to have children. Years, Adago. Nothing happened. Every month I waited. Every month I cried. Her voice shook. People laughed at me. They called me barren. They said I ate my children spiritually. Your grandmother, God rest her soul, told your father to marry another wife. She said I was useless. An empty tree. I had heard whispers about this before in half-overheard conversations. But nobody ever told me the full story. They only said, your mother suffered before you came. I prayed, she continued. I fasted. I went to hospitals. They told me my womb was weak. They told me it would be very hard for me to conceive naturally. She opened her eyes. Then one rainy night, she said, your father came home with a baby. My heart stopped. A baby, I repeated. What baby? Her gaze did not leave mine. You, she whispered. He came home with you. The room started to spin. I pulled my hand back without meaning to. What are you saying? My voice rose. That I'm adopted? Her face twisted. We never signed papers, she said quickly. It was not that kind of adoption. But yes, you are not my biological daughter. You are not my blood. Your father brought you home when you were barely a day old. I stared at her, my mouth open. Memories flashed through my mind like lightning. Faces that never looked like mine. Relatives saying, she doesn't really resemble anyone. The way my skin tone was slightly different. The way my nose looked more like nobody's. The way Auntie once asked, where did this one come from? And everyone had laughed loudly, too loudly, like they were covering something. My chest burned. Who are my real parents? I asked, my voice breaking. Where did he get me from? A hospital? A family? From the street? Mum looked away. Your father told me, she said slowly, that a young girl in his village had gotten pregnant. A teenager. Her family was ashamed. The father of the baby had run away. They wanted to get rid of the child. I felt sick. Get rid how? She swallowed hard. They wanted to give the baby away quietly, she said. No records, no noise. They just wanted the problem gone. She looked back at me. Your father begged them to give the child to him instead. He told me it would be our answer from God, that nobody had to know. We could raise you as ours, and nobody would ever question it. She blinked, and 2 tears slid down her cheeks. When he brought you home, you were so small, she whispered. So fragile. Your face was wrinkled. You were crying like the whole world had offended you. I almost refused to carry you. Why? I asked, my voice shaking. Because you were a reminder, she said. You reminded me that my own womb had failed me, that another woman's body had succeeded where mine had not. The words cut deep. I felt like I'd been stabbed. So you resented me, I said slowly. From the beginning. She winced, but did not deny it. At first, she said, I told myself I would love you like my own. I tried. I really did. I fed you. I bathed you. I bathed you. I sang to you sometimes when nobody was looking. But, I whispered. But every time you cried too loud, she said, her voice raw. I heard that girl's cry too. That girl from the village who had made a mistake and still given your father what I could not give him. Every time he smiled at you, I saw the way he had looked when he told me, at least now I have a child. Her voice hardened for a moment as she imitated him. Not we, she said. I have a child. My heart pounded. So you punished me for that, I asked. For existing? For being a baby he brought home? Her face crumpled. I didn't mean to punish you at first, she said quickly. I was just distant. I thought if I did not get too close, it would hurt less if something changed. But then, something did change. What changed? When you were about 5, she said, a strange look entering her eyes. I discovered I was pregnant. My breath caught. "Kamsi," I whispered. "Yes," she said. "Against all odds, against what doctors said, against everything I conceived. And this time it was mine, my blood, my miracle." She looked almost guilty as she said it. "I told myself I would love both of you," she continued. "The one God sent through another woman and the one he finally allowed my own body to make. But when Kamsi came, I failed that promise." She looked at me with eyes full of shame. "You were always so curious," she said, "always asking questions, always wanting to know why. You wanted attention. You wanted answers. You wanted love," she swallowed. "And I wanted you to disappear." The words hit me so hard I almost stopped breathing. In that moment, every memory of being pushed aside, every sharp word, every time she chose Kamsi over me, rearranged itself in my mind. This time I wasn't the problem child. I was the unwanted reminder. "You called me difficult," I said slowly, the truth settling into my bones. "All my life, difficult child, problem child, too much. All because I was not yours." She flinched. "It was not only that," she whispered. "You really were stubborn. You talked back. You refused to just bend." "Maybe because I knew something was wrong," I said, my voice rising, even if I could not name it. "Maybe my spirit sensed that I was being punished for something I did not do." She squeezed her eyes shut. "I know," she said. "I know I was wrong." I laughed. It came out harsh and broken. "You know you were wrong," I repeated. "After 28 years, after ignoring my birthday, after turning my room into a store, after using my salary like it was your personal ATM. Now, on a hospital bed when you need my kidney, you suddenly remember you were wrong." She opened her eyes again. Tears streamed down her face. "I am not telling you this to make you pity me," she said. "I am telling you because if I die and you never know, you will spend your whole life thinking you were born unlovable, that there was something wrong with you, and that is not true." My chest hurt. "You should have told me when I was old enough to understand," I whispered. "Not now, when you need something from me." She nodded slowly. "You are right," she said. "I should have. But I was afraid that if you knew, you would leave me. You would go and look for that girl, that woman who gave birth to you, and you would forget me, and then I would lose everything." Her voice dropped. "I thought if I kept you close with guilt and control, you would stay. That if I made you always trying to prove yourself, you would never leave us, because you would always be trying to finally earn my love." The truth landed like a heavy stone. "So you admit," I said, my hands trembling, "that you made me feel small on purpose?" She inhaled sharply. "Not always on purpose," she whispered. "Sometimes it was just my pain speaking. Sometimes it was jealousy. Sometimes it was fear. But yes, there were times I could see you needed a hug, and I gave you silence instead. Times I knew you wanted, 'well done,' and I gave you, 'do better,' because I thought if I softened, you might see how weak I was, and you would judge me." I stared at her. All the anger inside me was still there. But something else had joined it. Grief for the child I had been, for the mother she could have been, for the life we never had together. "So who am I?" I asked quietly. "Really? What is my real name? Did they even give me one?" She looked at me for a long time. "Your father told me," she said, "that the girl who gave birth to you named you Chisima before she handed you over." The name hit me like a physical thing. For a moment, I felt like I could see another life, another woman, young and scared, holding a baby, whispering, "Chisima." I had never heard that name before, but it felt strangely familiar, like a song half remembered. "Chisima," I repeated slowly. "It means, 'my God knows,'" Mum said softly. "I changed it when we brought you home. I named you Adago, daughter of pride, because I wanted to trick myself. I wanted to feel proud. But the truth is, I was ashamed. Not of you, of myself. Silence filled the space between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning my tongue since she started talking. Why are you telling me this now, Mama? She let out a shaky breath. Because you asked me for one thing I never gave you before, she said. The truth. And because, whether you give me your kidney or not, you have a right to know who you are. Her voice dropped even lower. And because I need to ask you for something as a mother, even if I was not a good one. My heart thudded. Here it comes, I thought. The final push. What do you want to ask? I said quietly. She held my gaze. For the first time, she whispered, I am asking you, not commanding you. I am asking you to forgive me. The room went very quiet. Forgive. The word felt too big for the little space we were in. I also want to ask you for something else, she added. Something harder. My throat went dry. Harder than forgiveness, I asked. Yes, she said. I want to ask you to consider giving me a chance to do at least one thing right as your mother. She licked her dry lips. If I live, she said, I want to spend whatever years I have left actually being your mother. Not just Kamsi's, not just the woman who used you. I want to know you, the real you. I want to meet the girl I pushed away, to see who you became in spite of me. Tears blurred my vision. This was the thing I had wanted all my life. For her to see me, to choose me, to ask for me. But now it came with a cost. A kidney. And if I say no, I whispered, if I don't donate, will you still want to know me then? The question hung between us. She looked down at our hands again. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I would like to say yes, she murmured, that I will love you and chase you and make it right, even if you refuse. But I don't know if I am that strong. I don't know who I will become if I realize that the child I hurt has decided to let me die. She blinked slowly. I might become bitter, she admitted. I might blame you. I might let your father and the others poison me against you. I am not a perfect woman, Adogo. I am just human, flawed, afraid. Her honesty hurt more than any fake promise. So in other words, I said, my voice shaking, if I save your life, I get the chance to finally have a mother, and if I don't, I become the villain in everyone's story. She looked at me with pain-filled eyes. That is one way to see it, she said. Another way is, if you save my life, you give both of us one more chance. If you don't, you protect yourself from more hurt, but you will carry this decision alone. My chest burned. She was not threatening me, but the weight of what she was saying felt like a stone on my heart. I stood up slowly. Her hand slipped from mine. Where are you going? She asked, fear flaring in her eyes. To breathe, I said. I can't think in this room. Please, she whispered. Don't run away. Not again. I paused at the foot of the bed. I never ran away, I said softly. You pushed me out. You just didn't notice yourself doing it. Her eyes filled with new tears. I turned and walked to the door. As my hand touched the handle, the door swung open from the other side. Dad stood there, his face tight. Kamsi was behind him, arms crossed, eyes red. Well, Dad demanded, did she confess her sins? Did she make you pity her enough to save her life? Daddy, stop, Kamsi said, though her eyes were locked on my face like she was searching for an answer. I looked from my father to my sister, then back at my mother on the bed. 3 people, 3 different expectations. One body, mine. I need time, I said. Dad exploded. Time again, he shouted. What are you still thinking about? She just told you everything and you are still dragging your foot like this. What else do you want? Blood covenant. Kamsi stepped closer. What did she tell you? She demanded. What truth? Why are you all talking in riddles? I looked straight at her. She told me, I said calmly, that I am not her biological child. The words dropped into the room like a bomb. Silence. Dad's eyes widened. Kamsi's mouth fell open. Mom closed her eyes as if bracing for impact. What? Kamsi breathed. What are you saying? I answered her without looking away. I'm saying, I repeated slowly, that I was adopted, quietly, that Dad brought me home as a baby, that Mum raised me with a heart full of pain and jealousy, and that all those years you all called me difficult. I was just the outsider you never told the truth. Kamsi's hand flew to her mouth. Daddy, she whispered, is this true? Dad looked furious. At first I thought he was angry at Mum for telling me. Then I realized he was angry at me for saying it out loud. For what now? He shouted. Why are you saying nonsense in front of your sister? Is this the time to start washing dead body outside? So it's true, Kamsi said, eyes shiny with tears. You mean she, Adogo, is not? She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, like the ground under her feet had shifted too. We will talk about this later, Dad snapped, cutting her off. Right now the only question is, will you donate or not? My head pounded. Always the same question. Never. Are you okay? Never. Do you need anything? Just, will you give? Will you sacrifice? Will you bleed? I felt something inside me steady, not go soft, not go hard, just steady. I took a breath, then another. I will give you my answer, I said, my voice calm. In 2 days. Dad scoffed. 2 days again, he muttered. Maybe by then your mother will be dead. Is that what you want? I looked him in the eyes. For once, I said, I am going to take the time I need. You have forced decisions on me my whole life, not this one. I turned to Kamsi. She was still staring at me, her eyes wet. Kamsi, I said softly, we will talk, you and me, alone. I think you also deserve the truth. All of it. She nodded slowly like a robot. Okay, she whispered, but Adogo, yes? If you are not biologically her daughter, she asked, her voice trembling, does that mean you are not really my sister? The question pierced me. I lifted my chin. I don't know what blood says, I answered, but I know what years say. We grew up in the same house. We fought over the same remote. We shared the same bathroom. We wore each other's clothes without asking, so maybe I am not your sister by blood. My voice softened. But I'm your sister by history, I said. What you do with that is your choice. I stepped past them into the corridor. As the door closed behind me, the weight of everything hit at once. I leaned back against the wall, my breathing shallow. My whole life was now divided into 2 parts. Before I knew, and after I knew. In 2 days, I had to make a decision that could change all our lives forever. Save the woman who broke me, or walk away and live with the echo of her last request. Forgive me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number again. Hello, is this Adalgo? My name is Nina. I think I may be the person you are looking for. I was told long ago that I once had a baby they gave away. My heart stopped. Another woman, another truth, and maybe another mother